Welcome back, everybody, to the show. I hope you're doing spectacularly. Let's start with something really fun. On Thursday, myself and the guys flew to Nashville to engage in a bar fight, as it was called, with a lot of MAGA, Trump supporters, conservatives, and Michael Knowles is a Daily Wire host, pretty big conservative influencer. He hosted it, and then I had a fellow liberal, you saw that on the panel, Zena, there with me, and it ended up being quite the experience. Lots of shouting. So the whole format is that you have a bar full of people, and then up on the stage, in this case, it was two liberals, me, and then MAGA man Michael Knowles. And it got heated at times, got silly at times. I'll play some of these clips for you. One of the cool parts was that crowd members, because it was a Michael Knowles event, it was essentially all Michael Knowles fans. And so they got to come up to the mic and confront me. So that'll be some of the clips that I have for you here. So much. I'm going to try to make this not like a 30-minute segment, but no promises because there's so much that I want to review. Starting with just the intro. They put together a pretty cool intro for this Michael Knowles bar fight video. And here it is.
No! Despicable person! No! I thought... I'm sick and tired of you!
Let me finish. You had a monologue already.
I tell people that Michael Knowles is my internet dad.
Stop it.
We got a bar full of people, and you want us to debate HOAs.
Because this is America! Welcome to Bar Fight. Tonight I'm joined by two libs.
That's my case. I think it's a pretty good one.
My first guest, that is Zena Ikeme.
You've been calling me a lib this whole time. I hate to break it to you. It might be a little bit worse than that.
Uh-oh.
Just be consistent. I've been very consistent.
Luke gets to finish his point.
I think this bell's rigged.
My second guest is one of the top names in online liberal commentary today, Luke Beasley.
So that is pretty cool concept for a show. Let's just start with this. A MAGA guy confronting me saying that libs don't have common sense. Where is your common sense? While we go through these clips, please do click the subscribe button if you appreciate this show. Simple gesture, but it goes a long way in boosting the message.
And I also find common sense questions tend to be the left's kryptonite. I find myself a common sense individual, which is why I vote Republican. My question is, you said two things tonight. One, you couldn't go 3 seconds without saying no kings earlier tonight. And you just brought it up again where you said Trump's evil and took over the government. I find this very ironic and
that kept happening. I kept making sort of facetious statements, and then they would all be like, "How dare you?" It's because one of the other questioners went on this long ramble with love about, I couldn't even understand what he was saying about good and evil and something, so I just threw out a silly statement. But anywho.
comical because the left tends to just want to continue to give government more power and more power and more power and basically just ask them what they should do with their life and how to pay for it. And you see that with the New York City vote that just happened. And I guess I just want to know where the common sense is coming from on, you can say no kings to Trump, who if he was a king, he wouldn't know, he would have just waved the wand and there would have been no government shutdown. And at the same time, ask the government to be bigger and bigger and bigger and solve all your problems for you.
Yeah, so Trump keeps expanding the power of the government too. I mean, he's the most authoritarian president we've had in a really long time. So you don't really care. Yeah, I'm not gonna explain it. Bill. Okay. Sending in. You just asked how. Sending in the military, for example, to America's streets. But where's the common sense? I can tell you where the common sense is. I think we should be allocating our resources to uplifting and economic stimulus, which is why the economy performs better under Democrats, despite the whole monologue that Michael went on.
The history lesson he called it.
If we lean into demand side, which you had to come up with 100 excuses for why Republicans always fail in the economy, but the demand side economics, where you actually invest, where people are going to spend that dollar the quickest through social programs, people need it instead of just keeping it in an account somewhere. That's actually dollar for dollar way more stimulative. So I think instead of huge tax breaks to the top 1%, I think that we should be allocating those resources to, at the very least, not taking away healthcare from 16 million Americans. So I mean, that would be pretty common sense to me.
Or just funneling it overseas to random non-government organizations, right?
So, but what does that have to do with? Are you okay with millions of poor Americans losing their health coverage because they wanted to give tax breaks to the top 1%?
Of course not.
No, I don't think that happened.
Then we agree.
I don't think that
And
quite
Trump's
happened.
bill is insane for that. Then we agree. That's awesome.
No, I think there's common sense things you can do with every dollar Americans pay.
Giving it in the form of more tax breaks to the top.
So this is something, take it down just for a second, that I kept repeating. You all know it so well, but when I go into these environments, a big question is, what do I want the audience to hear? Is it just going to be a fun, silly, performative type thing, or is there a message I actually want them to take away? And what can frequently happen is that hours sometimes pass by of debating, and a central, just very empirical point doesn't come through. It's just a lot of like culture war, mumbo jumbo, and partisan talking points. And so now when I've shown you some of these debates that I've done, you'll notice these reoccurring themes, because there's a lot of stuff we could debate, but a lot of it is based on a really long experience that each person has with the media and with their foundational beliefs and how they attach to certain principles. And so it's easy for them to hear buzzwords and go, oh, I'm on X side, Y side of this issue, so I'm not even going to listen. So that's why I avoid a lot of topics in debate settings, because most of them have those buzzwords that cause one side or the other to turn their ears off. But what to me is one that you don't have to be partisan at all to acknowledge feels really irrational without any broader foundational debate about our core political principles, is these core empirical economic or public policy issues, like with what Trump has just done, that you can have clear numbers on about the impact on health insurance or who's getting what benefits from his big, beautiful bill. And I think wherever you land politically, you shouldn't be okay with that type of redistribution of wealth from the bottom to the top. And that's why it comes up a lot, because it's like, here's something that we don't need a lot of political jargon. We don't need to do a bunch of political virtue signaling, just to say, let's look at the numbers of what he's doing with this one piece of legislation. And maybe it'll open your eyes to the fact that he's serving the opposite interests than you think he is. And unfortunately, throughout much of this debate, I was feeling much like Tucker is in this clip.
And Matt, the people aren't listening to me.
People aren't listening to me. All right, a little bit more from this one.
Top 1% when they're richer than ever doesn't seem very common sense.
Hey, Luke, is it the top 1%
Cool
that
thing is, I
benefits
think
from
we
no
agree
tax
on
on
that.
tips?
Like, there's probably a lot
No
of
tax
social
on
things
overtime?
there's a lot of things we disagree on.
Child
The
tax
cool thing is,
credit?
I think on reining in
Standard
the power of the
deduction
elites, we should all agree. You're listening about
where I disagree is I don't think you have the qualifications
but I'm not even
or
referring
me
to that yet.
to
I'm
talk
saying
about
if you,
fiscal policy
do you know,
at all.
Do you know the combined? Wait, what'd you say? Sorry.
Where we disagree is I don't think I have the qualifications or credentials or you to talk about fiscal policy at all.
And you think Trump does? He thinks the word
I agree.
groceries.
Luke doesn't have
team
the. I agree
behind
with that. Yeah.
He thinks groceries is like a new word that he invented. Yeah.
The crowd did not like that. I said it wrong. It's not a new word. It's an old-fashioned word that he brought back in his. So he's qualified to talk about fiscal policy, but apparently I am not, according to that particular questioner. What's so bizarre is, then what am I here for? It's such a weird, like, what do you mean I'm not qualified? First of all, I do this for a living. Second of all, I was brought here. I was flown here. Am staying in a hotel here. Am giving like 3 days here to specifically talk in front of you about such issues. But what I think really happened was the guy at the mic went, hey, if what Luke's saying is correct, which you can go look it up, it is, about the effect of this bill, do I really disagree with him? But like, that's my job. I'm supposed to disagree. I'm at this mic with the the red. I think the red gloves. I'm supposed to be the MAGA one confronting him. So where do I go then if I actually, I kind of do agree. Wealthy people benefiting while poor people suffer as the combined effect of this bill doesn't seem aligned with my values, because MAGA likes to believe they're for the working class, even when their leaders don't actually follow through with that. So then he just says, well, I don't think you're qualified to assess that. well, that's strange. I feel like that is kind of why I'm there. And I also think while you should definitely understand where you're more qualified, where you're not, what you know a good about what you don't, I think a key sign of intelligence is knowing what you don't know, knowing what areas you're not knowledgeable in is actually a sign of intelligence, and knowing when maybe you don't have value to add. But in political debate settings, it's kind of everyone's job to lob what they think they know at each other. Then you have a lady coming up to the mic to also confront me and to give you a sense of where she's coming from. She's such a big fan of Michael Knowles. She calls him her internet dad.
You listen every day. I love that. That's great.
I tell people that Michael Knowles is my internet dad.
Stop
When
it.
I don't know what to do,
Stop
I just
it.
listen to Michael Knowles and he tells me what to do.
Something's wrong with you.
That's great.
Real. Well, the only thing is I'm not Catholic, so I'm sorry, but...
Not yet.
Later in the debate, I said I was jealous because none of y'all have ever called me your dad. What the heck, Cole? Not a single... I've seen thousands of comments ranging from really nice to really mean, really normal, really sexual. We've seen it all. Really mean and sexual, those are weird. Those are kind of weird. What I've never seen is, hey, you're my internet dad. So maybe introduce that into y'all's comments. Okay, so here's your actual question.
Inception. My question is, your claim before was that Republicans are what for the economy?
Better. Worse.
Better. That's a Freudian slip. If I know
Well, the
myself.
Freudian slip is what that's called.
Okay. Well, here's my question: if Republicans are worse for the economy, then how come Nancy Pelosi's tracker is doing so much better than the Republican one by almost?
Okay, so the context for this, first of all, they kept bringing me drinks. That just needs to be said at some point, okay? I appreciate it. It was a bar event, and when someone just goes, here's a full one, I have an obligation to that person to drink it. So that was my slip up there. I blame on the drinks. The crowd loved it. I was like, Republicans are better. I mean, shoot, dang it. No, Democrat. But the second piece of context is, earlier, I was debating the claim that Democrats are better for the economy than Republicans, or they oversee better economic conditions, which is obvious and something we've gone through a bunch of times. And so she then brings up that Nancy Pelosi is famous, or at least her husband, for doing really well at the stock market and kind of touching on that congressional stock trading issue, which is something I think should be banned. And so that's what she asked. She said, you're saying Democrats are better, but one of the most famous Democrats has made so much money while she was in Congress with stock trading. Here was my response.
The economy, then how come Nancy Pelosi's tracker is doing so much better than the Republican one by almost 3 or 6%?
Because Democrats are better at the economy. That's why.
No, because I think that
They're better.
is insider trading better for the economy?
No,
Insider trading corrupt information?
Yeah, so insider trading is horrible. I think Nancy Pelosi shouldn't be able to do that. I think every member of Congress shouldn't be able to do that, obviously.
Then maybe
Okay, wait. Democrats have been fighting for that a heck of a lot longer than Republicans have. And the reason I don't like it is because it could lead to corruption, which is also why I don't like Trump's meme coin.
And then I'm going to skip forward. I won't tell you why. The drinks got on top of me for a second. Here's where I picked up.
AI chips deal
Okay.
with the UAE and his open brazen corruption with funneling money to. So it's the same reason I don't like the Pelosi stuff or anyone else using their insider information. I think it should be banned. I don't think Trump would ever sign that into law. I don't think Trump should be profiting off of his presidency either.
So do you think that's a very reasonable point, but do you think, like with Pelosi, I think we're all just admitting she obviously insider trades and it's totally ridiculous.
it's too good. People put that in their 401ks and they're making so much money.
Yeah.
She's like the best hedge fund manager in the country. But with Trump, it's not to say that there aren't questions, about, he obviously he's an international businessman, he has the crypto thing, he has all that. I'm just saying.
You're against it though. You can't be against it for Pelosi and then for Trump.
No, I guess I think what Pelosi is doing is illegal for every American other than members of Congress.
Right.
And what Trump is doing is really not illegal in any way.
What?
So you might say you don't like it. You might say we should pass laws against it.
No, there's plenty of laws.
Isn't it also true that Trump is the only president to take a pay cut in office?
No,
so why doesn't
that's not true.
He's
Yeah,
making
he's
so
making
much right now.
His net worth
I'm just
is
an art major, dude. I don't know.
his net worth has increased by billions just since he got in office. So, I mean, just be consistent. I've been very consistent.
And then I'll play the next part. That's something we hear a lot. We hear so much. And Jay and Nicole were saying they've heard people in their life go like, oh, but isn't it super cool that Trump doesn't take a salary? And it's like, what is not taking what's the presidential salary? Like $400,000 per year. What's not taking $400,000 when you're making billions? And then they go, well, that's just his normal business. He had that before. It's not though. And I gave them, it's weird. Where are the ears? We could play Tucker again. Why aren't you listening to me? If you would hear what I'm saying, it's not, oh, his properties that he's had for a long time are still generating revenue and he's getting, it's that he set up new business enterprises, new business deals, new crypto ventures that countries or individuals engage with, make him a bunch of money with, and then lo and behold, he gives them some benefit, whether it's the AI chips that are referred to there or pardons or whatever else. Foreign policy changes. And I would love to ban congressional stock trading. I've said that forever. And that is cute, sweet, adorable compared to what Trump's doing. So I can't take you seriously if you're saying you think Hunter Biden and Joe Biden did something wrong and you think Nancy Pelosi's corrupt because of stock trading, but then you're okay with Trump in a fashion that is way more quid pro quo, way more favor exchanging than anything you could ever find before in the history of the country with the president. And that's what makes me really sad is when I realized the crowd was kind of like, okay, yeah, all right, so you'll criticize Pelosi for that, even though she's just doing what is currently legal. But I wish she would have fought for it to get banned long ago when she was Speaker of the House. So I am criticizing her. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, but that's a little grain of salt compared to the grain of sand, I should say, compared to the beach that Trump single-handedly portrays. And then they're like, it was so much fun earlier before you brought up Trump.
Consistent.
I am.
You are obvious. If you did one story about Hunter Biden, you better be 100 times as outraged at Trump getting the UAE to invest billions, make his World Liberty Financial billions in a business deal, and then immediately all of a sudden he releases the restrictions on the AI chips that they really wanted, and which could then get into China's hands because he was enriched. Same thing with the Binance guy. He ends up pardoning the guy after Binance makes a bunch of money for World Liberty Financial. That's brazen corruption, right?
Yeah, I guess my point is on some of these. No, I don't. On a lot of these financial dealings of Trump, a lot of it occurred during the interregnum. The crypto thing occurred before he was brought in.
No, not the UAE deal.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you brought up crypto earlier, which is usually the one that most people point to.
I'm saying, how could you justify someone giving benefits to either people through pardons or countries through restriction relief after that country or that person enriches his family to the tune of billions?
Yeah, I think that President Trump has done a very good job being an international businessman, leveraging relationships for the good of the United States. I think that's true. And what I also think.
Wait, were you ever mad about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden?
Yeah, I was mad that the Biden family sold American influence and fired a Ukraine.
Guys, do you want it? I'll give it to you if you want it. He just said that Hunter Biden, that the Biden family was selling American influence, I think was the wording, and fired a Ukrainian prosecutor, Viktor Shokin. Ukrainian, blah, 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 blah. So what he's referring to, I'll just remind you because it's been a while. What he's referring to is that Hunter Biden was doing business for a time in Ukraine. Worked at a company, Burisma. Joe Biden was the vice president. The official U.S. government stance and that of all of our European allies knew Viktor Shokin was really corrupt and they wanted him gone. So Biden pushed for that. something that later we got pretty credible evidence actually Burisma executives didn't want. So Hunter Biden had a job. Joe Biden, I guess you could say, had some crossover because it had to do with Ukrainian corruption, and Hunter Biden was working in Ukraine at a prominent company. But there was never a coherent explanation of how Joe Biden benefited financially, or even Hunter Biden benefited financially for Joe Biden's vice presidential decisions. What you could prove is Hunter Biden, his last name was Biden, and so he was like, hey, I'm a Biden, hire me. And people were like, oh, maybe we could get an in with the Bidens. True. And that's kind of icky, right? And it's also how the world works. When you have a famous last name, people kind of want you, maybe we could get, but they never actually proved that any wrongdoing on Joe Biden's part occurred. So that's what he was outraged about. What he's not outraged about is not even just Trump's children, but Trump directly getting enriched by billions, not Joe Biden helping to buy a truck for $8,000 for Hunter, I think it was, which I don't even know how. Wasn't Hunter supposed to be enriching Joe? I think Joe lost money on that. Or whatever or the loan reimbursement where he made no money. But Trump himself to the tune of billions getting enriched, and right after doing favors for said enrichers. And he's not outraged about the latter. He is outraged about the former. Seems very consistent and honest, Mike. I do appreciate you having me on the show. It's fun.
Yeah, I was mad that the Biden family sold American influence and fired a Ukrainian official in order to enrich his son. I think those are different.
Biden was... You never found evidence linking him to Hunter, but even so...
You never found evidence. The money went straight to his house.
That's not true.
It did. It wrote his speech.
A reimbursement of a loan. But after all of y'all made of that, a whole big scandal, and then Trump takes all over, and there's no ambiguity, and his sons are going around the world making a bunch of money for his family, and then he's trading favors.
Yeah, listen, he has a very successful business, and his sons are businessmen.
So that's you I guess back everything about Hunter?
Certainly not. That was brazen corruption.
Why? What's the difference?
What's the
difference?
Here's the difference. Here's the difference. Eric and Donald Trump Jr.
Someone in the crowd, I'd love to hear you explain that. You're so loud and proud, you don't know what you're talking about.
Here's the difference. Eric and Donald Trump Jr. have very long-standing business careers long before Donald Trump entered office.
They don't have specific deals with people who need something from the government. They have new deals.
He doesn't want me to answer the question. He doesn't want me to answer the question.
So in the crowd, just since you can't really hear it, since they're not mic'd, just random people are shouting that big tech censored the Hunter Biden story. So I guess they're saying, well, we're not outraged by the corruption, but by censorship. Okay, so that's what they're arguing. You'll see why that's relevant.
Who need something from the government? They have new deals.
He doesn't want me to answer the question. He doesn't want me to answer the question.
You know what I'm talking about. Trump, you know what?
I can tell you the difference if you want.
You know what Trump's doing? He doesn't need big tech to censor or whatever. He's censoring the media himself.
Okay, so then it kind of went chaotic. Another thing we've discussed a lot. Oh my gosh, it's been so long. The temporary, you could call it censorship, by platforms suspecting that New York Post story contained misinformation because Giuliani, the source for it, wasn't allowing other journalistic entities to get their hands on the supposed evidence relating to Hunter Biden. And so they weren't able to confirm it. So they weren't out there able to report on it by independently confirming. For some reason, Giuliani wasn't letting them access it. And then the outlet that was, it had a lot of an icky stink. Then, before the election, it was a very short period of time, uncensored, and it got way more attention because of that temporarily incorrect decision, to be clear. But very temporary. And then it got more attention even than it would have before because of that, the drama. And that all happened before the election, so people still got to know about it. And we've now had that story floating around forever. And we learned a bunch of kind of gross stuff about Hunter Biden, but never what they wanted to prove about Joe Biden. So that's what they're screaming about big tech censorship. But then if you are against censorship, that doesn't have to do at all with the First Amendment, because it's just a platform deciding how it regulates its platform. Incorrectly, in many cases. But they're outraged about that, to do the same phrasing as the day before, but not Trump himself using his FCC to pressure outlets and censor outlets. Very bizarre. I would ask for a little bit more consistency. That would be very nice. Okay, this next one, let's just play it. I can't remember exactly what the topic is.
It has to do with all of us. It has nothing to do with red and blue.
Great point. And it is weird that I know a lot of people support Trump thinking that it's because you're populist or he's going to be good for the working class. I don't want to spoil what my next claim is, but
you love spoiling the claims because you keep changing the topic every time we speak.
It is weird because Trump and her point about the top 1%, it's not that people can't do well, but Trump, in a time of record income inequality, just passed.
So that's just me making the same point. Y'all know that. If you haven't heard that point on this show by now, you're crazy. Let me play this. This is a short that Cole made from the same debate where someone comes up. I've gone through this a lot with all of you that social media platforms need engagement. We talked about this a bunch yesterday. And so what fuels engagement is usually very provocative stuff. That means that more provocative, less rational stuff rises to the top very frequently. And so that gives, a lot of times when I talk to people on the other side, that gives them a very skewed perception of what the advocacy, what the mainstream, not what random people are saying, what the mainstream advocacy among liberals is. And so this individual came to a mic and says that she is a mother and believes that I, as liberal, I guess, don't want her to be a mother, which is really bizarre, and you'll see my response.
Do you really think that being a strong, independent woman is being a career woman who had a few abortions? Or is being a mother really feminist?
I'm really curious what you think liberals believe. I'm very proud of you on your motherly journey, and I wish you the best. And I think it takes a lot of bravery and courage to be a mother and a lot of work. And liberals, at least correct liberals, don't believe that you shouldn't, if you want to, create the most beautiful thing, a family. What we believe is that you should have the choice and the freedom to do that, or to pursue a career, or to pursue a career for a while and have kids, or both. And that freedom is something that, I don't know where Michael specifically stands, but some people in his cohort don't like the idea of and want way more rigid enforcement. We want freedom, and I love that you became a mother. I love that you said you also achieved things in your career, and the choice for your own life path is what liberals believe in.
Thank you. Here's the only problem with that, is that my Instagram feed calls it propaganda when other women promote being mothers.
That's because Instagram needs you to be upset and stay on the platform, so it shows you random nobodies who don't really represent the mainstream liberal view to get you upset, so you'll keep using their app.
Now,
yeah, I mean, true. I guess I have heard anecdotal evidence of that, but like, okay, let me just say this to get it clear. Whenever we divide up our political discourse into two sides, a binary choice, it oversimplifies a lot of things. And so if a massive country with millions, hundreds of millions of people is broken up into right of center or left of center, and then a label, which I like using the label because I want us to shortcut out of some of the basic conversations to get to the more interesting ones. And sometimes saying I'm liberal helps us jump past a lot of the basic label defying conversation. And then we can just immediately get to hashing out the more interesting stuff to me. So that's why I appreciate labels. I'm not saying we shouldn't have them. And I don't appreciate when people clearly have a political view and they clearly do land somewhere on that binary spectrum. But binary spectrum, that's kind of funny way to put it. But they don't admit it. And then you're just doing a lot of Q&A, and then you go, okay, so you're just a mainstream conservative. Why did we just waste all that time? You're like, no, well, I'm actually different where I see everything from every point of view. You could try to see everyone's point of view while also having your own point of view and identifying it. It's fine. It's not divisive, just identify where you think you land, even if you also have a mixed bag of other feelings. And then what is happening is with that, it sells for this side to see the most extreme version of that side. That's what's going to keep you online the longest, which is what the platforms need. And then this side seeing the most extreme version of that side. And so I'll just get off my chest. If anyone says they're liberal and their advice is, even if you want to, you shouldn't start a family, even if you want to, they're not a part of my movement and they don't fit into my label. Our advocacy, which is the mainstream liberal viewpoint, is all about choice, is all about freedom. and celebrating people's choices. And it is so amazing when people start families. And so that's kind of just a distraction, I think, from the more substantive conversations about what advocacy from either side actually serve people, whether they're pursuing a career, whether they're raising families, who actually uplifts families, what policies actually benefit those cohorts. And we get stuck in debating with people who aren't even there. That kept happening here, where it was like Michael arguing against someone who wasn't at the table, just some straw man or stereotype of like an irrational, crazy lib. And so then you might ask, if you're MAGA and watching this, well then, how do you know you're not doing that to the right? Fair question. And I'm sure there have been times where I've given too much emphasis to irrelevant factions of the right because it went really viral on my feed, because it's really engaging. But the framework that I've always used, or since I've gotten passionate about politics, to make sure I don't do that, is putting more of my attention on people who are in power. Because if they're in power, they, by definition, are relevant. And that's why I put a lot more emphasis on the leaders as opposed to randos who go viral on TikTok. A lot of the influencers I'm critical of on the right like to spend a lot of time on the randos on TikTok on the left to frame a worldview, and less on relevant leaders close to power. Moving forward to this.
I grant to you that it is true that under Democrat administrations, one second. It is true that under Democrat administrations, you can arrive at that statistic, but when you look at macroeconomic trends, you realize the statistics are total
even if
lie.
you control for specific economic crises, even if you do that, steady times without external factors, still, and you're citing tax cuts, which have failed.
What is GDP growth on average under the Democrats?
Now I'm going to go. And a great example of this is, and as I explained, everything you just went there was a fun history lesson and misses the point that I made, which is even analyses that exclude for specific
You made a broad
crises.
point, and I inserted facts into that. And then you said ignore those facts.
And then you're not hearing the facts that I'm saying. You just keep going off of regurgitated talking points. So
history matters.
Yeah, and history keeps proving that Democrats oversee better economic conditions. And then a really good example of this is that we had the whole pandemic collapse. Trump mismanaged a lot at the end of his presidency. The economy was in this chaos.
You're blaming Trump for COVID?
And then
for a Chinese virus?
His handling of it. Just listen, and then you'll be able to hear it better. And then that he handed this crisis, obviously, to Biden. And then throughout Biden's term, every single economic analysis shows that we were outperforming every other nation in getting inflation down. The speed we brought it down, because it was a global phenomenon. Talking about macroeconomics, you'll never apply that to Biden's economics. And then the recovery in general across all economic metrics, Biden way outperformed both expectations and every other country in the G7. And none of y'all ever acknowledged that. And then he hands an economy that had job growth throughout his entire presidency. The last job loss month was at the end of Trump's term. He hands that to Trump, and lo and behold,
during COVID. I think you're kind of making my point.
Listen, wait. Last point. No.
Right.
And then Trump loses jobs right when he gets back into office this term.
Here we go. Okay.
I have a strong belief that bell was rigged. It was always when I was getting cooking. When Luke entered the kitchen, the bell started ringing. Cole didn't like that. Cole don't like. He doesn't like when I go Gen Z. No, so I've said that too. My point about Democrats versus Republicans, I made it more zoomed out. Knowles went through this whole long, there's a bunch of external factors. And in some cases, there are external factors. But the underlying truth that I'm getting at, I'll circle back to in just a second. Because it's not about rah, I want Democrats to look good. There's an ideological reason that they, time and time again, oversee better economic conditions. It's not just random. Some of it's random. Probably how extreme the gap has some to do with the macroeconomic trends. But the gap itself is partially because of the governance. And there's something ideological there that I'll get to. But I then go, let's make it more specific, since we seem to be getting lost in the sauce on me making the century claim. Let's just talk about Trump v. Biden and kind of a story that y'all don't tell about what was handed to Trump in his first term by Obama, then what was handed to Trump in his second term by Biden, and what Trump left Biden. And an interesting stat was that job growth through all of Biden's term. At the end, yes, because of the pandemic, he acted like that. I wasn't acknowledging that, but I'm just ready. End of Trump's term during the pandemic, job loss. No job loss. Then Trump gets back in office. There's no more pandemic this time, baby. And then we have our first job loss month since Trump's first term. So that was the metric. It really had little to do with the pandemic causing the job loss his first term, but a metric to say it wasn't since then, but then the bell rang, that we had a job loss all the way up until Trump took over this time again, which is intriguing. I think that's notable, if nothing else. Now, why do I always pound on that Democrats versus Republicans with the century is just to kind of break people out of a ideological lie that they've been convinced that Republicans are better for the economy. So then it's kind of, whoa, if I can realize that's never been true if you look at modern American history, then empirically, then diagnose however you'd like. And Knowles says it's all because Democrats kept messing things up and Republicans then fixed it, which flies in the face of history. I mean, what did I just walk you through just in the last couple presidents? But okay, I don't even care. Diagnose it however you like. But you should take away, wait, I've been told forever Republicans are better. And that actually isn't the case just objectively. And then under that, why? A bunch of reasons. Some outside of the control of the people who were in power at different times. Trump didn't control the pandemic happening, but he did mishandle the. But I think it comes down to heavily, what is the economic philosophy? And Republicans are way more likely to lean into that supply side. If we put more money at the top, it'll trickle down. And Democrats, while they're far from perfect on this, are more likely to lean into, if you spend those dollars at the quote unquote bottom, or you invest them in programs that are supposed to be utilized by people who need that dollar the most immediately, then they're most likely to use it most quickly, which is more economically stimulating. And dollar for dollar, you get better growth, more stimulation than handing it to a bunch of people who are going to do any number of things with it, often that is not very economically stimulating, which is the tip top. So that's the underlying philosophy. That's why it's important to bring up that comparison. It's not just blue, woohoo, blue. It's because it should tell you a story about which just zoomed out like a bazillion feet, which economic philosophy has been shown to work both in the short term and in the long term. As shown by, you can do a lot of very demand side economically stimulative actions with policy that aren't really damaging to the debt because of the economic growth. And we've seen over and over promises about that with this trickle-down economics that fail and do bloat the debt, proving the failure of its economic gains. With all of that being said, Michael Knowles, shortly before the debate, decided he wanted to debate HOAs, homeowner associations, and apparently he's been having a debate with his audience about how he actually really likes HOAs. But a lot of his audience are more libertarian and they want to get rid of them because it feels like you're telling me what I can do with my house that I've, purchased. And of course, going into it, I've never really had a strong view. Like I've been irked before by HOAs, but I've never had a strong philosophical view about what is the principled correct take on HOAs. But he really wanted us to have a take because it was supposed to be a debate. So then I quickly found stuff about it, and you'll see this part was a little silly.
We're neighbors, and you get to make sure that crazy libs don't move into your neighborhood and they don't build a bunch of monstrosities next to you that make your life worse every time you open your window.
I'm a great neighbor. I want you to know that. I'm a little sick of this. But he told me we were going to do HOAs, so I looked up some stuff about HOAs that I didn't know, right? Yeah. And now I'm very passionate that I'm against you.
No.
You're a despicable person.
No, I thought.
I'm sick and tired of you.
We were on the same side here.
No, I'm not. Now, the main problem, I think, is that so it starts with the developer, right? Then they hand it over to some group of homeowners. Some Karens. Some Karens. Stupid Karens. Thank you. Yeah. And the problem with it, the reason people don't like it is all the homeowners don't actually get a say in it. A lot of these HOAs have 3 board members for a bunch of homes, and then they just lord over everyone. And no one wants that because this is America. being said, there should be HOAs. They should just be democratic among all the homeowners.
So I was just being silly. I got them all riled up and then was like, well, I agree. No governance. Oh, no very hyper localized governance over neighborhoods. It's not going to work. I get but I own the property. I should be able to do with it what I want. Yeah. Until your neighbor's in their front yard masturbating. You know what I mean? Like they're on their property, but they have big porn posters hanging outside the front of their house. So, Cole, is this something you've thought about? And so there has to be some local governance about if you have a nice house, you keep the front yard all nice, but then you're trying to sell it, and because there's no governance, your neighbor next to you has trash all in their front yard and their home's deteriorating, and it's like, now my home value just plummeted because no one's going to want to live next to the guy jerking off in the front of his house. And so there has to be some, but as I was just reading up quickly on some of the gripes and problems, it came down to, but the way they're often structured is whacked. And it's just a few people will lord over everyone else in a lot of neighborhoods. And it's not as democratic as I thought it would be. And so then you're being told what you have to do, and you need to pay to get this fixed on your roof, and you need to do this and that. And you actually don't get as an equal say in the governance of your neighborhood. That I'm not okay with. And these should be restructured to be just more like local government, but on a really small scale that everyone has a democratic say in. Because I'm pro-democracy and I'm pro-American. Woo! If the crowd were here, they would have cheered for that. So I'll just have you know, Cole. All right. And then finally, this just cracked me up. Zena was making a point about abortion and teed up the crowd to say that they would prefer to save a fetus than Luke. Me.
Let's take Luke over here. If we said Luke or one fetus, like literally sitting like on the table.
Zena, when do human beings?
I like Luke. Come on, that's not nice. She didn't even ask the question yet.
Which one would you, if you had to choose between saving the life of Luke or a fetus sat on this table, which one would you choose, Michael?
Zena, when do you believe that human beings get rights?
Okay, next question.
So the crowd's cheering fetus. If it were going to be me or fetus, they choose fetus, which, is heartbreaking, needless to say, but I got over it. So that was the appearance. It was honestly fun. And I don't care what you say. I still think, even in these times, we should talk to each other and scream at each other. I do. And I found it cathartic that afterwards, big kudos to the Daily Wire's production. They had just a ton of staff members who were all great, and security, and I felt very, very safe, and they did a really good job with all that stuff. And as I was leaving, it was kind of like, all right, here, we can take you right out. But I found it so interesting, the idea of staying and talking to all the people who I was just like kind of, a little ways away from, but it was very disconnected being up on a stage. And so, and I walked, it wasn't like before I was hanging around, I walked up to the stage with all the welcome to the show stuff. And so we decided to stay and talk with people. And it was really cool to hear people who had been shouting at me the whole night and saying they would rather kill me than a fetus, actually have plenty nice things to say and kind of further hash out some of what we're talking about. And I do think that's still important.